We have one bill on the agenda for today, House File 100. I do want to note that we are prepared to come back later this evening if we are not able to finish member questions, amendments, public testimony. So, Chair Stevenson, the only item, as I mentioned, we do have a quorum present, so we are able to, sorry, I should have done that before the minutes. We are all good to go. Chair Stevenson, would you like to move your bill? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will move that House File 100 be recommended to be re-referred to the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee.
Chair Stevenson moves that House File 100 be recommended to be re-referred to the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee. Chair Stevenson, I understand you have an A1 author's amendment. Would you like
I do, Madam Chair. The A1 amendment makes a couple small changes. It gets the bill in the shape I'd like the committee to consider it.
Okay. Members, any discussion to the author's amendment to get the bill in the shape that he would like? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails and that amendment is adopted. Chair Stevenson, to your bill as amended.
Members and Madam Chair, I will be brief because there's a lot of people who want to speak today and we want to make sure we hear from them. House File 100 is the bill to legalize adult use cannabis in the state of Minnesota. Members, Minnesotans are ready. Cannabis should not be illegal in Minnesota. Minnesotans deserve the freedom and respect to make responsible decisions about cannabis themselves. Our current laws are doing more harm than good. State and local governments are spending millions enforcing laws that aren't helping anyone, money that could be put to far better purposes. There is a better way where we are honest about cannabis and its impact and model our laws accordingly. Over the last 3 years, we've listened and worked to build a Minnesota-specific model for cannabis legalization. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that there's no other bill that's gone through as rigorous and complete a process of development that this bill has. It is really novel in that respect. Our bill will create a safe, well-regulated, legal marketplace where Minnesotans can grow, sell, and buy cannabis if they choose to do so. It includes best practices for consumer protection, health, and public safety. And critically, it includes a robust expungement program so that people, and we should be clear that it is disproportionately people of color who have been caught in the criminal justice system due to cannabis offenses, are able to move on with their lives. And I am going to leave it there, Madam Chair, again, because we have so many people here who want to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, we will move to amendments. There are a number of amendments to discuss today. So first, we have the A2. Representative O'Driscoll, would you like to move and describe the A2 amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The A2 amendment moves to strike the word provided in the bill on page 30, line number 10, I should say in line number 10, and to delete lines 11 and 12. And this has to do with restrictions on where cannabis manufacture, sale, and solicitation may occur on this. And so I ask for members' support to clarify that language.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. Chair Stevenson, I understand that you have an amendment to the A2 amendment. Would you like to move and describe the A8?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move the A8 amendment, which is an amendment to the A2 amendment. This amendment removes some places that communities can restrict cannabis from being close to. The current bill has in it nursing homes, union headquarters, and houses of worship. I think that Representative O'Driscoll's amendment is more workable if we are more narrowly focused on schools and daycares. And so I would ask for support on the A8.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, any discussion to the A8 amendment to the A2 amendment? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion prevails and the amendment to the amendment is adopted. Back to the underlying amendment, Representative O'Driscoll, any comment on?
Madam Chair, although it's not exactly what I want, it is an improvement in the language. This bill has several stops to go. Perhaps we can provide the committees in the future more information about why it's important to make sure we have the right definition of who is and who is not, or where not we want to have this. I would suggest that members vote yes on the amendment as amended to include, or to improve, I should say, the language on the bill.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. Mr. Chair, any comment?
Having adopted the A8, I'm comfortable accepting the A2. I'd ask for a yes vote on the A2.
Okay. Members, any further discussion to the amended A2? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion prevails and the amendment as amended is adopted. Now to the A3. Representative New Brindley, would you like to move and describe the A3 amendment? Or somebody else going to offer it?
I think, Madam Chair, I will move the A6 amendment when we get there.
Okay. Will somebody be offering the A3 today?
Madam Chair, I can offer the A3
Okay.
amendment.
All right.
The A3 amendment before Representative New.
Representative New Brindley.
I moved the amendment for you, Representative New, so the runway is clear.
Thank you very much. For some reason, I had, different amendment. I do have the A3 amendment. I'd like to move that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Would you like to describe the A3?
I would. Thank you. The A3 amendment simply puts a warning label on packaging for use of marijuana with, particularly with pregnant women. There is, the language that I put in the amendment comes from both the CDC and the Minnesota Department of Health. CDC is actually, doesn't have a ton of information, but the Department of Health here in Minnesota has pretty extensive language available on the concerns of marijuana for pregnant women. And I just would like to read one thing from what the department put out. It says, marijuana is one of the most commonly used addictive drugs after tobacco and alcohol. Marijuana use during and after pregnancy is increasing nationwide, and legalization may give people a false sense of safety. And we want to make sure that that is not the case in pregnant women.
Thank you, Representative New Brindley. Chair Stevenson, any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative New Brindley. I appreciate the concern about, pregnant people and pregnant women and all of this. I think it's an important issue that you raise. I think that the language that you are prescribing here, though, I'm not sure it's entirely accurate and based in science, the specific language here. And the specific concerns that you are warning people about. And I also don't necessarily think that it's a good idea for us to be specifically writing into statute what warning labels should be. I think that warning labels should be based on science and should be determined by scientists and not politicians. Having said that, I do think that there's a place for us to figure out a way to make sure that you're concerned about making sure that people have good, solid information about, the health impacts of substances they're consuming before they, before they consume them. I think we can get there. So what I'm going to ask members to do today is adopt this amendment, but with the understanding that we've got 12 committee stops left on this bill, and we're going to keep working on this. And so, Representative New Brindley, I know you're on a couple committees that probably are going to see this bill again down the road. I'm just going to tell you that the language will probably look different at the time you see it next in committee than it looks coming out today. And we can keep working on that and talking about that, because I think that I have concerns about this language that you're proposing, but I'll take the amendment for today so that we can continue having the discussion.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chair Stevenson. I appreciate the willingness to work on this. I would just like to be clear that the language in the amendment does come directly from the Minnesota Department of Health. I mean, I'm reading from what the Department of Health says, and marijuana use during pregnancy impacts fetal brain development, increases risk of low birth weight, preterm birth, and stillbirth, and it also very directly from from MDH. THC can pass to the baby through the bloodstream into placenta and breast milk. THC can be detected in infants' urine for 2 to 5 weeks after exposure. THC is stored in fat, so it could continue to expose the baby over time. So I appreciate the willingness to work on this, but I hope that, Chair Stevenson, that we don't water this down and that we make sure that whatever we do very clearly indicates the risks to pregnant women. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Stevenson, any further comments?
No.
Okay. Members, any discussion to the A3? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails, and the A3 amendment is adopted. I have the A4. Representative Perryman, you like to move and describe the A4 amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to move Amendment A4. Quite simply, it says that it's about events, possession, and prohibition, or prohibiting at outdoor events. And it just basically says an owner or an operator of a private establishment or the host or organizer of an event may prohibit the possession of cannabis flower, cannabinoid products, hemp-derived consumer products on premises of the establishment or event. So basically, what it's saying is giving a choice to these individuals, the vendor, the owner of an establishment, to be able to make their own decisions if they will allow cannabis products on the grounds or in the establishment when they are promoting and having an event. And as we know in the summer, we're outside a lot. We enjoy that and would like to move this that would give a choice to those individuals.
Thank you, Representative Perryman. Chair Stevenson, comments?
Madam Chair, members, I'm going to ask members to not accept this amendment this time, to vote it down at this time. I think we can possibly continue to discuss this, but I don't think there's anything in law that would prohibit from private owners of property from, controlling their premises as they see fit. I'm not sure that this is necessary. I also do want to stress for the committee's information, just to be clear, and this isn't directly to Representative Perryman's amendment, but it's important to note that the bill does not change the operation of the Indoor Clean Air Act in any way, shape, or form. I know that it's a concern that comes up when people are thinking about this particular issue, and it's not what you raised in your amendment, but it seemed like a good time to remind people that the Indoor Clean Air Act is not impacted by this. I also am troubled by Section B in particular in terms of the trespass language, which is another reason why I'm not comfortable with this language at the moment. But as I keep saying, we have 12 more committees and we can keep talking about it. So as it stands, I'd ask for a no vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, any further discussion? I'll go to Representative Perryman.
I just would like to encourage the thought of church festivals, events like this that go on in Minnesota that are largely attended by families, children, all kind of individuals, and that I just encourage you to think of this outside the realm of all kind of events that Minnesota Quality Events stand on and are part of our summer events with everyone involved.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would just make the point that, as Chair Stevenson said, he doesn't believe that the law would prohibit this from happening, in which case we should just put the safeguard into the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Members, any further discussion to the A4 amendment? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. The motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. On to the A5. Representative Farr, are you offering the A5?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to offer the A5 amendment. Madam Chair, this amendment simply states that no Minnesota chartered financial institution, a bank, credit union, trust company, bank and trust, or savings bank shall be required or compelled to do business with a cannabis business. The complexity of compliance here, I think, is the issue for some banks, and so I don't believe that they should be compelled. And again, this simply says that they're not required to.
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Farr. I don't think they are required to under this bill or any existing laws. That's step one. Step two is actually, to the contrary, federal law presents an obstacle to financial institutions engaging with cannabis businesses. And I mention that in particular because the consistent feedback I hear from financial institutions, as chair of this committee and otherwise, is that they would like that federal law to change so that they can do business with cannabis businesses. Just within the last week, I had multiple bankers come to me and say, would you help us twist the arms of our U.S. senators to make it a priority to pass the federal legislation, which I think has passed the House on multiple occasions, to allow banks the ability to work with cannabis businesses. So I don't think this is necessary, and frankly, what I'm hearing from banks is they want to be able to work with cannabis businesses. So I would ask for a no vote on this one.
Representative O'Driscoll.
And I would encourage a yes vote on the FAR amendment for the following reasons. If we go back to the original genesis of this, this is still an illegal substance, an illegal substance under federal law. States have been able to move forward on their own volition to legalize and to bend the federal law. At any point in time, the federal government could turn around and say, we are going to change our mind and we're actually going to enforce the law on the Schedule 1 item here. Why I think the FAR amendment is very appropriate is if states are going to be moving forward and legalizing the use of this particular product, what's going to stop the state from requiring those state chartered financial institutions from doing business with those particular businesses, even if they choose not to? Great amendment, Representative Farr. Your experience in the industry is well noted here today. Thank you. I encourage a yes vote, members.
Members, any further discussion to the A5 amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The motion does not prevail, and the amendment is not adopted. I have the A6 amendment. Representative Dotseth, will you be offering the A6 today?
I will. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking in regards to House Number 100A6. It's in regards to the adverse effect of secondhand smoke. I ask that we do a further study in regards to the consequences that may result from the secondhand smoke from the use of cannabis product, AKA marijuana. I think a point would be point number one would be lung and respiratory effects, long-term effects of lung and respiratory. I think point number two would be looking at the toxins. I think if we look back at the tobacco industry, the levels of toxins that were in tobacco was found to be much higher in marijuana. So I ask that further research be done into that. I think point number three, we really need to look at the THC compound. It's found in marijuana. I think the psychoactive effect, which is a high, how that's going to have a long-term effect or even a temporary effect on people in the surrounding nearby area while that is being used. I think point number four would be looking at more research needing to look into the secondhand effect of our children, how that's going to have a long-term effect and a short-term effect on our children. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Dotseth. Chair Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Dodseth, you know, one of the unfortunate consequences of the prohibition of cannabis over several decades is it really prevented a lot of good and needed research on cannabis to being done. And that, I think, was an error that we are paying the consequence for. And it's really unfortunate that people who were so dead set against cannabis blocked even research being done for decades. Research is a good thing. We should be able to look into the scientific basis for things. I think that's kind of what I was saying about Representative Brindley's amendment, is that I think that that's another area where when I read the CDC website, the Department of Health, what they noted to me was that there was an absence of good research in this area because of the federal prohibition for a long time. You're proposing another report be added to a section where there are several reports and several research. I think it's a good thing. I think this is a good one to add. I support the amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, any further discussion to the A6? All right. Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion prevails, and the A6 amendment is adopted. I have the A7 amendment. Representative O'Driscoll, would you like to move and describe?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the A7 amendment, and just a little bit of background on the A7 and what we're attempting to do here. In the state of Minnesota, if you are a vendor and you are selling tobacco products, or you are a vendor or a proprietor that is selling alcoholic beverages and the like, and you fall behind on your property taxes or miss other fee payments that are necessary, your license to be able to sell and distribute product is suspended until such time that you are made current again with those various entities. And there seems to be a real desire to move the use of this particular product forward, and we should be simply treating this in the same vein that we do with alcohol and other and tobacco or other physical altering substances. And so the amendment says basically that those ideas. And so I encourage a yes vote on the A7 to bring this in line with what we do with other regulated products here in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. Chair Stevenson.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Driscoll. To the very last thing you said, I don't think this does bring it in line with respect. I think that the liquor posting laws look different than this. I think that this is an idea worth considering, and having a similar structure to what we do with liquor and other products is maybe something we could work on together. Your amendment, though, would treat cannabis different than liquor in a few different respects. And so I'm not going to accept it today, but you know, the bill has to go through the tax committee. And I think by then we can maybe have a better, more robust discussion about how this works. So I'd ask for a no vote today.
Any further discussion? Representative O'Driscoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Stevenson, sometimes amendments are offered with the idea of continuing to get work. And so, Chair and Representative Stevenson, I look forward to working with you on this, because if we are going to have these different regulated products, we should have tighter rules and regulations. And again, what we are constantly told by the private sector is different rules for different products for different things at different times. If there can be some standardization, that's going to help the industry as well. And we can just take a look at what has happened after last session with what I'll call the edibles, and I'll just leave it as such.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. Members, any further discussion to the A7 amendment? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. No. The motion does not prevail, and the amendment is not adopted. Finally, members, we have the A9 amendment. Representative O'Driscoll, will you be moving the, Representative Dowd.
Madam Chair, I was in trouble last time when I tried to move an amendment with those old minds.
Thank you, Representative O'Driscoll. Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. This, as I read through the bill, it was somewhat concerning to me that local units of government really didn't have any say in what was going to happen. That is inconsistent with the way that we handle other products in the state of Minnesota, namely alcohol and tobacco. This amendment would have local units of government issuing licenses to businesses that were going to participate in this new industry in the state of Minnesota, and give them some say, and reasonable say. I think this is probably not as far as I would go had I drafted this personally myself. But I think this is a very reasonable amendment that gives, it basically handles this product the same as it would by having a local unit of government issue a license to a tobacco retailer or a alcohol retailer in the state of Minnesota. So, and I would invite any comments from the author of the bill on his thoughts on how that interaction should happen, because I think it is something where I noticed a little bit of a hole in the bill. So appreciate that, and I'd ask for a yes vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Dowd. Chair Stevenson, I'll go to you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Dowd, I think that there's an ongoing conversation that needs to happen about the interplay between state and local government on this issue, and I'll start by saying that I'm happy to continue to talk to you about that and work on that, and other members have raised that as an issue. I think that, I think Tim O'Driscoll said it really great just a minute ago, that standardization and having a consistency across the marketplace is valued by business. And what we don't want is a patchwork of different rules in different parts of the state. So I worry that the amendment that you've drafted here takes us too far in the direction of a patchwork and moves us away from that standardized approach that we want across the entire state. So I'm not willing to accept it today, but I'm happy to keep talking and working on it, because I do think that there's some balance to be had here. What we don't want are communities entirely opting out of this at this stage. That's not an outcome that we want, and what we don't want is entirely different regulatory regimes between different parts of the state. I've said many times that we aren't copy pasting from any other state, but we are learning from both the successes and the failures that have occurred in other states that have attempted legalization. And I would point in particular to California, where there's wildly different rates of taxation between different jurisdictions that has resulted in really bad outcomes. So that's an example where if we go too far down the local side, we end up in trouble. So bottom line is, I don't think that this amendment improves the balance of the bill, but it's an area where I'm open to further discussion.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that from the bill author. This is an area that I do think needs some work. Obviously, it sounds like you're encouraging members not to vote for this amendment today, but we'll commit to continuing to work on it. I think of what you said about some consistency and not having a patchwork. I can't help but think that we allow a city to say that a company can't sell flavored tobacco, but they will not have the ability to say that someone cannot sell marijuana in their city. So what I'm looking for is a little consistency. And while I'm not always the strongest voice for local control, today I am. And I think this is an opportunity for I don't think cities should be saying that we can't sell flavored tobacco in a particular city. I think the state should be making that decision. But in this case, this brings it consistent with alcohol and tobacco. And a city does get, this doesn't say a city can't, and maybe nonpartisan staff that wrote this can clarify if I'm saying something out of turn. This amendment doesn't say that a city can't sell it, or that they can say that retailers can't sell it. It just sets up some reasonable, by them having a licensing process, it sets up some reason, them to have some hours, it's defined in the amendment, but days of the week, hours, those sorts of things, places in their city where it could be sold. But this doesn't say that a city, this amendment stops short of removing the language on line 30.4, which is a local unit of government may not prohibit the establishment or operation of a cannabis business licensed under this chapter. So the businesses can still operate. This just lets a city or county put some reasonable restrictions on. And I think that makes sense. We do it for tobacco, we do it for alcohol. I think we should be doing it for this too. So I think it is a reasonable thing. I would like to continue to work, very sincerely like to continue to work with you on this as this bill moves along. So again, I'd encourage a yes vote.
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Frankly, Leader Dowd, I wish actually the amendment had gone a little bit further and had allowed municipalities to say, no, this isn't a good fit for our community. I implore you to think about examples. My mom grew up in a really tiny town in southwest Minnesota. At its heyday, it was 600 people. I think it's down to about 300 people in population. It's a tiny little town. But what keeps that town alive today is a charter school. And that town is completely built at this point around a school. And it would be perfectly reasonable for that town to say, you know what? Marijuana is not a good fit for our tiny little community. And that community should be able to deny that. That community should have that level of control to say our identity at this point is a school, and we should be able to say no to this. So I hope that you will think more about that moving forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Stevenson, coming from a city that on the city council that just went through developing a process to deal with low-potency edibles. I'm very interested in this amendment and the spirit of which I'll be voting no, but I'm interested in participating in working through this because I think there are some important local control issues here.
Chair Stevenson.
Well, I actually agree with Representative Dowd that there shouldn't be inconsistency about flavored tobacco opt-outs, and I'm looking forward to voting with him when we bring the flavored tobacco ban bill to this committee and vote it out, and we can vote in favor of that statewide ban. Together, you actually, in the opening amendment, the author's amendment, we brought this bill into conformity with the flavored tobacco bill, so it is consistent there. Look forward to voting with you on that. And I also will note that we did also adopt an amendment today that Representative O'Driscoll offered that should address the concern you have, Representative Brindley, about the school in the community in southwestern Minnesota, where you will be able to, that community will be able to say we don't want a dispensary within 1,000 feet of that school, and even if that means it can't be in the town because the town is so small, they will be able to adopt that amendment. Having said that, we don't allow communities to opt out of selling any other substance that you can't be like, well, we're not going to do prescription drugs in our community. Sorry, no Tylenol in this town. We're not going to any other substance. So we're not going to have opt-outs here, and I'd ask members to vote no.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any further discussion, members, to the A9 amendment? Representative Dow.
I just want to be clear again to the bill author. This bill would not allow a community to opt out, or this amendment. This amendment does not do that. So,
Thank you. Mr. Chair, any further?
No, that's fine.
All right. Members, any further discussion to the A9? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The motion does not prevail, and the A9 amendment is not adopted. We will now move to public testimony I am comfortable speaking on behalf of all my colleagues when I say that we are thrilled that Minnesotans are able to join us again in person here at the Capitol as we consider a number of bills this session. Today, we have nearly 30 people signed up to speak, so we will be holding testimony to closely to 90 seconds. There will be an alarm that goes off. I don't intend on interrupting you as long as you hear the alarm. Wrap up your comments. Otherwise, I will have to interrupt you, and we'll move on to the next testifier. We do want to make sure that everybody who signed up has the opportunity to speak today. When your time has expired, that timer will sound. Please sign in with the pages before you leave the room today. So first on the list, I have Angela Dawson, followed by Veronica Alfaro. Oh, Representative O'Driscoll.
I think we're going to do just what I was going to ask. If you're going to talk about who's at the bat and who's on deck, maybe get a few people lined up so we can expedite things and get people signed in and keep things moving. Thank you, Madam Chair. What do you think on this one?
Absolutely, thank you. And third on the list is Jeff Brinkman. So if you just want to prepare yourself. Ms. Dawson, please come to the table, state your name for the record, and proceed with your testimony.
All right. Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Angela Dawson, D-A-W-S-O-N. I am a fourth-generation reclamation farmer. My family has been farming and cultivating on these lands for the last several generations. And I am also the co-founder of an organization called the 40-Acre Cooperative. The 40-Acre Cooperative is working to create equity within the agricultural system here in Minnesota. I have been working with the 40-Acre Cooperative specifically to support marginalized farmers. That includes Black, Indigenous, and rural farmers. I am also a rural farmer in Pine County, Minnesota, where we have the same poverty statistics as Hennepin County. We have been able to leverage, so far, hemp and cannabis as an opportunity to equalize the playing field for historically marginalized farmers and for rural communities. I have hired more than 20 people over the last 2 years in the hemp business in Pine County and created jobs just on my own accord. Not only am I asking for a more safe and regulated market for adult use cannabis so that I can continue to support our farmers and our communities in the co-op and our surrounding rural communities, but I'm also asking for better access and equity to capital markets. As Representative...
If you heard the timer, I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Veronica Alfaro, Jeff Brinkman, and Nathan Ratner is the third on the list.
Hello, my name is Veronica Alfaro, and I am the owner and operator of Minnesota Essence. We are a small Latino-owned, woman-owned cannabis company based out of Eagan, Minnesota. Our purpose is to promote mobility in a natural and purposeful way through education, cannabis, movement, and self-care, while also destigmatizing the plant at the same time. We have mainly created topicals until more recently, until the law changed, creating our first THC product. Using my grandma's recipe, we create little Mexican sugar walnut cookies. Entering the edible market really helped our business. We currently use a shared space commercial kitchen to be able to create safe consumable products for the general public. Not having the option to operate out of a shared space would really impede on our business and create a huge barrier of entrance, leaving it open for bigger companies with more resources and access to capital to come in and take over, repeating what has happened in other states. Let's avoid that by creating a path for small businesses like myself, that are trying to serve our community by creating avenues to participate and not be left out, including access to opportunity of mentorship and financial support in small business owners like myself in this space. This past year, I really spent my time putting myself out there and seeing what type of opportunities were for small business owners. And I found that there's tons of grants and different opportunities and mentorships, but not for people in the cannabis space. So for myself, leaving us out of that game. So I thank you for allowing me to testify, and I appreciate that you guys consider that when you guys are going through your stuff. So thank you.
Jeff Brinkman. Introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony. Nathan Ratner, Patrick McClellan are following.
Jeff Brinkman, last name Brinkman. Members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to speak today briefly regarding the legalization of marijuana and cannabis. I own a Superior Cannabis company with my partner Tom Cotter, who's a nationally renowned regenerative and organic farmer, and we grow hemp. We're looking to go into the marijuana industry as soon as possible, and I had a whole sheet here, but I really want to cut it short. My intent here is really to ask you to really analyze these bills and give small business an opportunity to enter the market with low barriers. Everything we have right now is self-funded. So as we go through this process, we can't afford to start up 2 and 3 times and reformulate 2 and 3 times. We want this done in an equitable way, in a fair manner, and focused on small business and small farms. So if you could keep that in mind as this bill is written, we'd appreciate it. And I really appreciate the time today.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Nathan Ratner, followed by Patrick McClellan, and then Marcus Harkis. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Nathan Ratner, R-A-T-N-E-R. Good afternoon, Ms. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me here to testify today. My name is Nathan Ratner. I am the co-founder and vice president of The Great Rise. We're a 501c3 organization here in Minnesota focused on cannabis policy research and public education. Our goal is to ensure social and economic equity for everyone in our state within the adult use cannabis industry in our state. Minnesota is the 3rd most prosperous state in the country, but we have the 3rd worst racial wealth gap, worse than the state of Mississippi, which is 4th. At the same time, 47 of the 50 poorest counties in our state are in greater Minnesota. The Minnesota cannabis economy is estimated to grow to more than $1 billion in revenue within the first 5 years and can be a catalyst to advance equity across our state. I challenge you today to create the most equitable cannabis policy in the country. Currently, it's New York. So I challenge you to beat New York, just like we're going to do this weekend. They, within the text of their bill, they commit to a goal of awarding 50% of all cannabis industry licenses to social equity and social and economic equity applicants. Let's, as a state, commit to 60% of all licenses. We have the chance to be the first state to do a majority of licenses and lead the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ratner. School. Patrick McClellan, please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Great, thank you.
My name is Patrick McClellan. I was part of the small group of patients that lobbied for the original medical cannabis law. This bill in its current state will take away medical cannabis for children with seizures and people like myself. I preface this statement assuming you will fix that. I believe it's very important not to over-regulate the separation between adult use and medical cannabis. We don't need a separate building. We need a separate entrance, but we don't need a separate grow facilities. We don't need separate buildings because all this cost will be passed straight down to the patients. Walmart and Walgreens both sell to the general public and have a separate checkout for prescriptions, a partition for speaking with the pharmacist. It needs to be just that simple, or the costs are going to be passed straight back down to the patients. I believe the manufacturers lied to the legislature and the patients about lowering prices once flower was added to the program. Because of this, full legalization and more medical licenses is our only hope for local entrepreneurs who will choose patients over profits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McClellan. Marcus Harkis, you are up next. Tom Evanstad and Kalandra Revering is on deck. So please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning. My name is Marcus Harkis. I'm the former director of Minnesota NORML, the campaign for full legalization. I'm on the board at the Cannabis College. I'm the community relations manager for Unifor Holistics, a Minnesota cannabis company. and I've been a cannabis consumer for the past 24 years. I'd just like to preface the rest of my remarks by saying that prohibition is the problem, not cannabis. The question is not if you think people should consume cannabis, because 700,000 Minnesotans already do, but if you think we should be criminalized for it. So I'm here to speak in favor of full legalization, and I generally like House File 100. It has a lot of good things in it, but I still believe that it's prohibition light, so I'd encourage you all and the committees ahead of us to improve it. You know, I'm not satisfied with the current form because prohibition light, it perpetuates criminalization. It legalizes, but still leaves a lot of opportunity to criminalize people. And it seems as if people with criminal records may suffer discrimination from participating in the legal market, you know, in employment and ownership opportunities, and I'm opposed to that. I'm really here to represent people that are not in the room, people like my friend Justin, who has 9 years of professional experience in the Colorado and Michigan markets, but because of his criminal market, may not be able to come home. I'm here to represent my friend Mason Alt, who started the company that I work with now. We have 40 employees. A lot of that grew since the low-dose edibles expanded, and we are poised to hire hundreds of people, you know, if full legalization comes. But he might not be able to participate in that market because he has a felony for possession. And I'm here to, honestly, represent my herb man who loves cannabis, he respects cannabis, but he's afraid that he'll be shut out of the legal market.
Thank you, Mr. Harkis.
So, yeah, I just want to encourage us to create pathways from the illicit market to the legal market.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Tom Evenstad, next Calandra Revering, and followed by Dr. George Real Muto.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Chair Stevenson. My name is Tom Evenstad, Evenstad, and I testify today in support of the bill. I'm a current enrolled patient in the Minnesota Medical Cannabis Program, and I testified at the sole medical cannabis hearing that Representative Carly Malin had. My belief is the citizens would be better served with the 8% tax revenue going towards infrastructure, mental health beds, affordable housing, daycare relief, drug treatment, cannabis education and research, opioid prevention, and the state patrol instead of regulatory fees and reparations that are already in the licensing provisions. Get the regulatory fees from the $17.6 billion surplus instead of the taxes generated from the cannabis sales. Unless the bill terminates the state's medical program, legalizing cannabis will force the big pot monopoly to finally reduce the highest prices in the nation that have forced patients to other states like Michigan, where the prices average 8 to 10 times cheaper, or the illicit black market where people have been shot dead or are trying to obtain cannabis. I strongly urge the committee to add language prohibiting law enforcement from using the "I smell weed" ruse, the same way that Illinois has post-legalization. I've personally been victimized by the confiscation ruse. If racial disparity and equity is truly a concern, add the Illinois provision. Minnesota deserves adult recreational use cannabis as a far safer alternative to alcohol that has taken too many lives, including the life of my own nephew, Matthew Thomas Campagnoni, to a drunk driver. Alcohol and tobacco are both far more dangerous, so let's end the hypocrisy and let's legalize it. Thank you.
Thank you. Calandra Revering, I apologize if I said your name wrong.
Calandra.
Please go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you. I've been researching and actively working to open a cannabis business since 2019. I have visited over 40 dispensaries across Nevada, California, Illinois, and Arizona, all spending my own money. This bill can provide minorities and women-owned businesses to open and operate successfully. Across the U.S., approximately only 20% of cannabis businesses are owned by women. The percentage of minority women is even lower. One of the key challenges for women looking to start a cannabis business is lack of access to capital. If they do find an investor, the women-owned businesses often receive less funding, fewer resources, such as mentorship and strategic guidance, not like their male counterparts. What has ended up happening is states have created more limited license models. It's become much more expensive to get in the game. The model often favors people with more money, like white men, and not people like me. I believe this is an opportunity for Minnesota to be a leader in improving these statistics. One more thing. As a criminal defense attorney, I want to give you a glimpse of the effect of marijuana convictions. The loss of a job you've worked for in 10 years and the loss of your pension, the loss of the right to vote, the loss of housing. If maintenance comes in your apartment and sees marijuana, you will be evicted. A ticket on your record for possession of marijuana. This affects families, and I hope you take the opportunity to amend the bill to include people like me.
Thank you for your testimony. Dr. George Realmuto, followed by Rihanna Buchholz and Alex Hassel. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
I'm Dr. George Realmuto. I'm a child psychiatrist, and I'm here mostly as a parent. Madam Chair, representatives of the committee, I'm a retired child and adolescent psychiatrist and professor emeritus of psychiatry at the University of Minnesota. I'm a parent, scientist, researcher, and clinician. Know that by using evidence-based knowledge to make decisions, I will do the right thing for my patients, my family, and myself. My daughter Kathleen, friends called her Kat, died 3 years ago at the age of 37, leaving our 6-year-old granddaughter without a mother. Kat was an acclaimed dancer, painter, sculptor, and staunch gopher. Excuse me. Staunch gopher basketball and football fan. This is a picture of her daughter, Giada, named after this chef, Giada De Laurentiis, as Kat was also a creative and generous cook. The story of her demise started in high school, where she began to smoke cannabis. There was little support for treatment at that point, and Kat made several decisions in her life that made it clear she was not going to give it up. She also began to abuse stimulants, which is what people who are addicted to cannabis do when they get things done. She also became very interpersonally irritable, especially having difficulty maintaining relationships because of her irritability. It is well known part of cannabis use that the calming brain substance of GABA, the GABA neurotransmitter, is depressed. and
Dr.
is
Realmuto, I'm
stimulating-
going to have to ask you to wrap up.
Yeah, right.
I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
We have to change the law so it's not available to anyone under 25, because that is the neurodevelopmental step at which the brain is completely developed.
Thank you.
Parents will be coming back looking at you to understand why you allowed this to happen to their family.
Sorry for your loss. Rihanna Buchholz, followed by Alex Hassel and Scott Neal.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Rihanna K. Buchholz, and I'm the Legislative and Coalitions Director for Americans for Prosperity here in Minnesota. I'm here to testify on behalf of the cannabis legalization bill and reiterate the importance of its passage. Legalizing the use of recreational cannabis will unleash a new era and a step forward in our state, allowing individuals to take advantage of an emerging market while smothering a black market that is untaxed and unregulated. There are many aspects that we are pleased to see come to fruition, such as criminal justice provisions related to expungement and the flexibility with the allocation of generated revenue. While we are overall supportive of the legislation, we also see areas for improvement, namely a reduction in the sales taxes. The goal of this legislation should be to stifle and eventually extinguish the illicit market. High taxes will negate this objective, upholding the black market as a preferable alternative. Second, we advise against over-regulation. Businesses and individuals that opt to enter the market should be able to do so without overly burdensome mandates and unnecessary barriers that inhibit growth and innovation. We look forward to this next chapter where individuals can prosper while maintaining their rights and freedoms, and where goods and services will be available for commerce legally without the fear or restraint of a failed prohibition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buckles. Alex Hassel, Scott Neal, and then Heather Backus. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Alex Hassel. I'm here on behalf of the League of Minnesota Cities, representing 837 cities across the state of Minnesota. Cities have spent considerable time this past year working to put reasonable regulations in place for the THC edible products that were passed last session with a very narrow regulatory framework, with many implementing licensing ordinances or temporary moratoriums as we seek more guidance and oversight by the state. We're glad to see the edible products included in House File 100 and brought into much more substantive regulatory framework. However, the current draft of House File 100 lacks meaningful involvement and no authority or oversight by local governments. The enforcement of adult use cannabis will fall heavily on local governments and will be a significant time and cost burden. The regulatory structure must recognize this through a partnership between the state and cities. Specifically, cities must maintain the authority to license the existing cannabinoid retailers and future adult use cannabis retailers, including the ability to opt out of authorizing the sale of the products within their jurisdictions. As we know, local communities will embrace these products at varying degrees. We do appreciate the discussion on the amendment offered regarding local licensing and hope to continue that conversation as well. There are other portions of this article that we would like to discuss and are happy to continue working with you on, including cannabis event licenses, on-site consumption of the products, and other public safety concerns. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to work with you, Chair Stevenson, and members of the committee to build a regulatory framework that allows the cities and the state to work together in the management of these products. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Scott Neal. I'm the city manager of Edina, and I'm here to affirm a lot of what you just heard from the League of Minnesota Cities. I'm here on behalf of the League of Minnesota Cities. My particular city council has not taken a position on the larger question of legalization, but we have taken a position that I think will be fairly common among many city governments, local governments in the state, and that is around local licensing. Local licensing gives us in the city, in the local government business, in the city business, an opportunity to know who we're doing business with, who's doing business in our community. It also gives us the key ingredient we need for law enforcement and regulatory control. When there's going to be a problem, and there will be a problem with a retailer at some point in the future, it's just not an option for us at the local level to go point people to St. Paul and say, go talk to state government about this. It will be a local issue, and local control and local enforcement will be demanded by the people that we all work for. So that's key to the way that we work with retailers in the area of alcohol retail sales and tobacco retail sales. We have developed an expertise around background checks, around enforcement checks, and around penalties if there needs to be penalties for poor behavior. So that's something that's very important to us, and we hope that you will consider that as you go forward in your consideration process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Heather Backus with Ryan Hamilton, followed by Dean Rose.
Mr. Chair and members of the House Finance Committee and Policy Committee, thank you for allowing me to submit my written testimony opposing Cannabis Bill HF100. I'm Heather Backus, a mother of 4. We lost our only son, Randy, to cannabis-induced psychosis and suicide on July 17, 2021, at just 21 years old. He started smoking cannabis at 15. It was easily accessible and social. He was diagnosed with ADHD in childhood, never had any other issues, but after smoking cannabis was also diagnosed with anxiety and depression. Legalization in other states misled him to believe that it was helpful, and it wasn't. It actually took his life. He went to wilderness therapy, he graduated, he moved to a legal use state, Colorado, and there he obtained his medical marijuana card. He sold to other children, he sold to other humans, bought it at a tax discount, and it was every guardrail you had in place didn't work. Over time, he became increasingly paranoid, grandiose, delusional, and experienced full-blown psychosis in March of 2021. He went to a brief stint in treatment. On April 2021, he had a gun in his right-hand pocket that was registered, and he said, You know, he was going to take his life. He didn't commit suicide that night. He went to Denver Health, was put on a 72-hour hold and told he didn't have a bed available, so he had to leave in 24 hours. So every guardrail you put in place failed. 6 years after beginning his cannabis use, he took his life on July 17th of 2021. He sent us a text and said he was trying to quit. 45 minutes later, he sent a text and said, "I'm sorry. I love you. I love my dad. I wish I would have been a better person." He died because he thought he was mentally ill. He was sick. He was grandiose. He was delusional. He had hallucinations. What you're putting in place is not safe. Do your research on the amount of THC in products and protect our children. Protect our human family. The cost you endure will be extensive.
So sorry for your loss, Mrs. Backus. Thank you for sharing your testimony. Ryan Hamilton is next, followed by Dean Rose and Rich Neumeister.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Ryan Hamilton, Government Relations Associate for the Minnesota Catholic Conference. The Minnesota Catholic Conference is opposed to House File 100 in its current form. Minnesotans are good-natured. When given an opportunity to right a wrong or help or make life better for a neighbor, they step up. But I encourage anyone who supports legalization out of a sense of justice to look deeper into what this bill really does. Well-meaning Minnesotans will be appalled when they discover that while House File 100 offers redemption to those who were harmed by the war on drugs, it makes that redemption contingent upon the commercialization of a drug that wreaks havoc on the human brain. No amount of regulation can curtail the damage that today's high-potency recreational marijuana will do to Minnesota families and our quality of life. According to a 2020 study, the rates of cannabis use disorder in people ages 12 to 17 grew 25% more in states that legalized recreational marijuana than in those that didn't. If this legislature has any interest in protecting young Minnesotans, it will increase the minimum age limit to 25 and add a THC potency cap to this bill. Minnesotans must ask, who benefits from a bill like House File 100? The only people who have benefited from this style of marijuana legalization are wealthy investors. House File 100, as currently written, plays whack-a-mole with injustice. For every one individual who receives an expungent, countless children, adolescents, and vulnerable adults will suffer from the collateral consequences of commercialized THC and the normalization of drug use. If the push for legalization is really about criminal justice, then the legislature should move the provisions found in Article 4 and 5 as a separate bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Dean Rose, you are up next. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony. Rich Neumeister and Scott Farrell are following.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Dean Rose. I'm president of Broadway Liquor Outlet. I'm a third-generation liquor retailer doing business in Minneapolis since my grandfather started the business in 1948 and have been serving our committee for over 30 years. Today, I'm here to speak in favor of the many provisions contained in Article 1 of House File 100 on behalf of the Minnesota Licensed Beverage Association, which has been representing on and off sale licensed beverage retailers in the state of Minnesota since 1952. The members of the MOBA are appreciative of being included in House File 100, specifically the fixing of language in current law prohibiting retailers from selling low-potency products described in HF100 in both liquid and other forms. It is my experience and belief that the public assumes these products would be available in our retail stores for purchase. The MLBA takes our role in retailing of controlled substances very seriously. We have been entrusted with the ability to sell alcohol and tobacco to individuals of legal age as dictated by law, and common sense dictates that our members should also be allowed to sell the low-potency products outlined in the proposed legislation. Public safety is the utmost important in this regard, and we believe House File 100 contains important language necessary to regulate the sale and consumption of these products. We appreciate the trust being put in us, and we look forward to working with all of you as this legislation moves through the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose, and thanks for sticking to the timeline. Mr. Neumeister, you're next, Scott Farrell, and then John Barty.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Rich Neumeister. Representative Stevenson indicated that this is a comprehensive bill. He's missing one ingredient. I disagree with Mr. Stevenson on that, and that's called transparency. When you're doing a big stew like this, transparency is fundamental and essential for a $500 million industry that this business will be, the cannabis business will be. And I'll say there is none. Let's go right to the point of the bill. Look at 3930. 133930 is basically all the data on all the 13 licensees, those categories, of the cannabis business. They took 1341, which is as legislators know, you take things that are other parts of law. 1341 is the licensing provision for doctors, in general, professional kind of licenses. You don't do that with the marijuana business. So everything is secret, except for name and designated address. That is not right. I would like to see owners, partnerships, and investors. Other states have more transparency and accountability than we do. Some of the other things that's important is, the inspection data, the revenue done. I can go on and on. If you want to take a look at least what the data elements that are all going to be not available, over 20 of them, is on line 3110. That is part of the application package. I could go on and on, but if you're going to be serious about having this business, you've got to have transparency and accountability, and I don't see that right now. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the few moments of your time. And of course, as always, I'm always willing to help.
Thank you, Mr. Neumeister.
And I've done with many folks over the years.
Scott Farrell, followed by John Barty, and then John Houselayden.
Hello, my name is Scott Farrell, and I'm the general manager of Down the Valley Record Stores, one of the oldest independent chains operating in the Twin Cities for over 50 years, selling vinyl records, gifts, and age-restricted products since 1972. After the passage of the federal farm bill in 2018, we've been selling low-dose cannabis products legally and responsibly, absent of the horror stories that you see in the media about underage sales and access, motor vehicle accidents, etc. Since August, with the passage of the 5 milligram THC bill, we've exclusively been selling low-dose Minnesota-compliant products in our stores. In fact, after the Minnesota bill was announced last summer, the city of Golden Valley contacted us for help to make sense of the new bill, and I'm proud to say that we worked together with the city council, who had the courage to pass one of the first THC licensing programs in the state, which has been working very well this far. A recent check-in by a member of the Board of Pharmacy in our stores reinforced that positivity, as we're given high praise for the way in which our products were being displayed and sold to our employees, who also educate the consumer during the process. I know that we aren't alone in the state, as we have many exceptional retailers doing the same thing. Ultimately, after reading Bill HF100, we have serious concerns about the new bill, especially with lumping low-dose hemp-derived cannabis products in with those of full adult-use products. We are interested in participating in the adult-use market, but the challenges of the new bill regarding the licensing and regulations in all likelihood would make it unrealistic for us to operate under these guidelines as it stands. If a business like ours, for 50 years under our belt, have concerns about doing this well and doing it and getting into the market, who will be able to do it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. John Barty, please introduce yourself. Proceed with your testimony. John Houselayden and Ted Gallaty are following.
Hello, my name is John Barty. I am a lobbyist for Uniflora Holistics, a black-owned and woman-owned cannabis company here in Minnesota. I'm here to testify in favor of the bill, but more so to remind you members of the people who we will be counting on to make this industry sustainable and thrive here in Minnesota. It will be the cannabis users, and currently in the bill we have a lot of criminal penalties that will create kind of a gray area for the freedom that users should have. Right now you could go and buy 2 ounces from the dispensary and be arrested for a petty misdemeanor on your way home. We have set a floor that is far too low for criminalization right now in the bill, and we are just looking for you guys to open up this process to the legacy users and industry members who can give you a better idea of what is reasonable to have inside and outside of your home, and what just seems like, a good guess for people who aren't familiar with cannabis. It's like, oh, no one would have more than 23 plants in your home. But I know users who would want more than that because they are older, they live in a rural community, they have circumstances that are unique to them. So we need to make sure that these people are heard from, because they will be the ones who will make this industry what we want it to be, both profitable, equitable, and sustainable here in Minnesota. So I thank you all, and I look forward to continuing talking with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barty. John Houselayden, followed by Ted Gallaty, and then Mason Alt.
Good afternoon. I'm John Houselayden, President of the Minnesota Trucking Association, and here today to oppose House File 100 in its current form. Legalizing recreational cannabis will make our roadways less safe. Speeds are up, law enforcement is understaffed, and there are no reliable roadside tests to assess impairment. How can putting more cannabis-impaired drivers on the roadway make that situation better? Data from Colorado shows traffic deaths where drivers tested positive for marijuana increased 138% since legalization. Minnesota faces a shortage of 8,000 truck drivers. Truck drivers are federally prohibited from driving while under the influence of any Schedule I drug. House File 100 will increase the likelihood that persons will consume cannabis and pop positive due to confusion and misinformation. Once positive, they will be relieved of duty, likely never to drive a truck again. A recreational user of cannabis may not want to be a truck driver today, but in the future they may. And the cannabis lifestyle will make it nearly impossible for them to ever pass a pre-employment drug test. An MTA member with operations in Minnesota and Colorado reports their ability to recruit new drivers in Colorado has become significantly harder due to one thing: cannabis. The applicants simply can't pass the pre-employment drug test. Our driver shortage will only grow worse if this bill becomes law. We stand ready to be subject experts with you on the impacts on highway safety and workforce, and we urge you to vote no on House File 100 in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Houselayden. Ted Gallaty, then Mason Alt, and Sean Eber.
Hello, my name is Ted Gallaty, G-A-L-A-T-Y, and I am the owner-operator of two businesses. We are working on a third business in Wisconsin. We are hemp growers. We've grown industrial hemp through the Minnesota Department of Ag since 2018. We were an early adopter. We started selling CBD with THC in 2019. It met the legal requirement. It still meets the legal requirement. So why I'm here is I do want to testify. I'm glad that we aren't really talking about this as a recreational bill, because marijuana is not necessarily recreational. Alcohol is recreational. Tobacco is recreational. There's no health in those two products. Cannabis, on the other hand, we have an endocannabinoid system. No one can deny that. No one can say we don't have that. We also have cannabinoids produced by the body. And we have receptors in our brains and in our spinal column and throughout our immune system and throughout the body, okay? So this is a health issue, actually. I don't know why we don't talk about that. We don't restrict vitamin C in foods. We need to start talking about this, what it is. We've had a relationship with this plant for 10,000 years. Obviously, it's something that we need to continue with. We shouldn't have had this probationary period from 1937 until now. And yeah, I'm passionate about it. I have family members that take it. I have community members. I have people that come into my businesses. All they do is get better. Why? Why are we having this discussion? I do believe we need regulation. I don't want to see it in minors. The prefrontal cortex does develop until age 25. I will acknowledge that. And if a youth gets a high dose of cannabis, they can have a psychotic break, and that can have repercussions throughout their lifetime. But we need to have an educated, informed discussion, and that's what we do. We're Hemp Maize Minnesota. We educate and inform the public. We will also be expanding to Wisconsin because the legislation kind of pushed us to do that last year. So if you have any questions with that, please come see me. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Mason Alt, introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony. Then Sean. Oh, all right. Thank you for letting us know, Mr. Harkis. Sean Eber, and finally Ryan Satt.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and the members of the committee. My name is Sean Weber, spelled W-E-B-E-R.
Mr. Weber, I apologize for the typo.
No problem. I actually started a cannabis company in late 2018 as a means to help friends and family that were stigmatized by cannabis did not meet the medical conditions of the medical cannabis program and simply just found it unaffordable. And so what I did is I was working with companies out west, bringing in products to disseminate to friends and family. After about a year, it actually turned into a full-time job when I left my corporate position. What I learned is coming from a small community of 900 in south central Minnesota in a very conservative area, it was well received. And it was well received because of how we were promoting it and offering it to the community. It was an education-based process, and it was, as the previous gentleman testified, the body uses it as a vitamin. And so we were able to overcome a lot of the destigmatization, and we were well received in our very conservative community. Within a year, we were the third largest employer in our community. So with that said, we politely asked the committee to keep this bill fair and equitable. We politely ask that there is still a route for the hemp industry to pursue in an adult use cannabis realm. But more so, when we look at these statistics, we need to be honest with ourselves. We can make numbers say anything we want. Just because there's an increase in individuals testing for cannabis, we need to remember that there's an increase in cannabis users. So overall, I just politely ask this community to be honest with statistics and to keep this bill fair and equitable to all of those involved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Finally, Ryan Satt, please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Hello, my name is Ryan Satt. I'm the founder and CEO of Northwoods Cannabis. Just want to thank everyone for the work on the bill so far. We have worked in Michigan, New Mexico, Colorado, all over the country consulting with caregivers. We've worked in the medical industry and then as owners at the commercial scale. We've seen the impact directly of, and that's what I want to stress the most, is the bulk cultivation. Not allowing, because what happens is a company that just has unreasonable amounts of money comes in and goes into a city that allows cannabis, and they say you can grow unlimited plants, and that basically puts any small cultivators, hoping to be in the business out of the running. So it goes a long ways to make the industry what it should be and give people a fair chance. I appreciate everything that everyone's doing, and also on the tracking side. I've worked with, so I wrote software as a software engineer while I've been working in the cannabis industry as well. That integrates fully with Metric and BioTrack. I've worked with both and am happy to consult or work with, the committee at all in deciding which direction to go. And then if Minnesota has interest in going beyond the tracking that those systems offer, that's what I do as well. But again, just thank you for your time, and we look forward to, working with everyone in this industry. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Satt. Yep. And thank you to everyone who testified today. We will now move to member discussion and questions. Members, any discussion? Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I'm not quite ready, but this number is good enough. I would just say, Representative Stevenson, I appreciate your willingness to take a couple of the amendments today, Chair Stevenson, and I hope that that is an indication of the fact that you understand that this bill still does need work, and that it's not ready. We are aware of the constraints of committee time, and so we were pretty selective in just offering a few amendments to the bill. However, there are still significant concerns and problems with other areas of the bill. Just for example, on page 26, it addresses family daycares and that family daycare providers can allow the use of cannabis on their premises outside of daycare hours. And of course, the concern there is that then cannabis is on the premises. It's on the premises, and then in the morning or whatever, children are also on the premises. And there isn't really, there are not clear parameters around that, and I think that that's just inviting dangerous situations. I would also address on page 29, the licensing issue. You know, this is significant. The bill prohibits an annual licensing fee, and the reality is we use licensing fees to pay for the administration of the licenses. And instead, there are massive general fund appropriations in this bill. You know, I was quickly adding up all of the appropriations, and I'm at over 43 million in general fund appropriations, most of that ongoing in the tails without even getting through all of the different departments. I'm not even through all the appropriations yet. This is a massive appropriation, and we have no idea what the tax revenue is going to be. We don't know yet what the tax revenue will be, but we do know what the very significant expenditures for the state are going to be. And we're not even collecting annual fees for licensing. This is really unusual. And a very strange carve-out. I'm not sure why we would do that. And in addition, you know, we've talked about the local issue, you know, for liquor stores, et cetera. There is local licensing for those things. And different municipalities charge different fees for that. And they do so based on their needs. Along with bringing alcohol suppliers into a community, they also bring additional public safety needs into their community. And those needs are in part addressed through that additional revenue that comes through those licensing fees that have been prohibited in Article 1 of this bill. It's really unusual to function on that level. And it really puts individual communities in a tough spot, because one thing I did not see in the appropriations is funding for communities to deal with those public safety needs. There's funding for state patrol, state level functions, but not for individual municipalities. And those are the folks who are going to take on the brunt of that potential cost. I would just add one more concern in Article 1. And again, I could go through a litany, but I understand time constraints. You know, it talks about the criminal background checks and the criminal history check required. And it doesn't actually require the federal background check, only state. It's permissive to do a federal background check, but not required. And that seems to leave a significant hole in potential safety issues moving forward. Like I said, we addressed just a few issues via amendments today, and I am sure we will do much more of that as this bill moves through the committee process. But on every page of this bill, I see significant concerns on how we are moving this forward. And I will be voting no on this bill today. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. But I hope, Mr. Chair, that you are sincere in your commitment to make real changes to this bill. I would also just point out that we didn't ask for a single roll call on an amendment today. And it's because we're not trying to play politics with this bill. We're trying to make it better. We are trying to do things that will keep Minnesotans safe and that will keep our communities safe and keep that local control of communities. And I hope that was taken with the intention that it was given. We really do want to make sure that if this is happening, that we are doing this in a way that protects Minnesotans. Thank you.
Members, any further discussion? All right, I apologize. Representative Niska is next on the list.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Chair Stevenson. I have a question about the duty that's placed in the Office of Cannabis Management in 13, line 30. They're given the duty to end the illicit market in cannabis, and you know, the worst thing you can do is give someone a responsibility to do something without the authority, without the actual tools to do it, and so. The worst thing we can have here is the worst of both worlds, where we take on all the costs and public safety and health costs of increased use of cannabis without actually ending the illicit cannabis market. So what are the tools that the Office of Cannabis Management has to actually end the illicit cannabis market under this bill. I see unmarked vehicles, but I don't see anything about law enforcement officers. I don't see anything about, I mean, is the office going to have armed employees in order to, deal with situations in which there is a potential for or a need for law enforcement in a way that might, in other situations, we obviously, arm law enforcement officers that we send into situations like that. So are we really giving the Office of Cannabis Management the tools and the ability to do this obligation that we are giving them, where they must, the office must eliminate the illicit market for cannabis flower and cannabinoid products, as the bill states?
Chair Stevenson?
Madam Chair, Representative Niska, thank you for the question. I will answer it both as a lawmaker, but also, as you might know, a working prosecutor. When the legislature is not in session, I work as a prosecutor handling felony level criminal cases. Your question suggests to me that you think that, because you're asking about armed law enforcement and other things, that to me suggest a law enforcement or criminal justice approach to eliminating the illicit market. If we could eliminate the illicit market through a criminal justice and armed law enforcement approach, we would have already done so. That is what has been the design, goal, and practice of not just Minnesota government, but federal government for decades. And it is not working. And I don't believe it will work. So the strategies you're asking about are not the strategies that I think move us from an illicit market into a legal and regulated market. I believe that if we create a legitimate marketplace with robust consumer protections that is convenient and affordable, that people will choose to participate in that legitimate market, consumers will choose to participate in that legitimate market as opposed to participate in the illicit marketplace. And so the way that we are going to accomplish the elimination of the illicit market is not by pursuing the same strategies that we've tried for decades and doing them not as hard, because, I mean, I think the whole point of the bill is to legalize the substance. So clearly we're not going to do the same thing we've been doing for decades, but to try a different approach, and one that I think has a much higher likelihood of being successful.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Stevenson. I appreciate the position that bringing some businesses and consumers into a legal market may move some over, but the experience in other states is that there still is an illicit market that exists, and there was testimony about the level of taxation, about the difficulty of licensing, and there are a lot of tools that deal with those suppliers or market participants who want to be part of the licensed market. The question, again, and I don't think I heard an answer to this, is, and we see it in other states that are trying to license and regulate in this area, that there still are actors who don't want to participate in that and grow it on their own and sell it in the illicit market transaction. So if the office does have the duty to end that, not just to reduce it or something like that, but the statutory duty to end it, what are the tools that they have to deal with that part of the illicit market, the people who aren't even applying for licenses, who are just trying to completely avoid the regulatory process at all? What can the office do about that under your bill?
Chair Stevenson.
Madam Chair, Representative Niska, you may not have liked my answer, but I did answer your question. And that's fair. I mean, we don't have to see eye to eye on this. I mean, the goal, and let's be clear, among the duties are promoting public health and welfare, protecting public safety, eliminating illicit marketplace for cannabis flower, meet the market demand. These are, the duties that we are imposing upon this board, the things that we hope to accomplish through this bill. Different states have had different levels of success in eliminating the illicit market and creating a legitimate market. And as I have said repeatedly, I think we are trying to not make the same mistakes that some of those other states have made. We have all new kinds of mistakes that we're going to get to make here in Minnesota, right? You know, I think we have made a choice here about taxation and licensing fees that's entirely consistent with what we're trying to accomplish here. And you know, we heard Representative Brindley talk about her concern about not having licensing fees. And I mean, there's a very clear reason why we didn't do that. And it's exactly for what you're articulating here. Our taxes are much lower than they are in many other places, and we don't allow local governments to tax for exactly the reason you're articulating here. And frankly, the taxes maybe should be even lower. And that's a conversation that we can have. But this is trying a new approach for Minnesota to eliminating the illicit marketplace.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Stevenson. The part of the question that I don't think was answered was whether the office has any law enforcement tools, any armed officers, anything beyond unmarked vehicles. And it sounds like the answer to that is no, that they don't have any of those tools. But it's not just about us having a policy disagreement. That's the part of the question that I don't think you've answered yet. So am I understanding your answer correctly on that?
Chair Stevenson.
Well, Madam Chair, Representative Niska, you know, I'm looking over at our able House Researcher, Ben Johnson, to make sure I don't answer this correction incorrectly, and I'll let him answer it if I do. I think that I'm not sure that we're creating new law enforcement agencies within the Office of Cannabis Management. The state of Minnesota has a lot of law enforcement resources they can bring to bear on these issues. I know that firsthand from my day job experience. I'm not sure that that's the problem here. And I don't know if Mr. Johnson wants to correct me that I've overlooked something in the bill.
Mr. Johnson.
Madam Chair, Representative Stevenson, Representative Niska, and other members, it is correct that there are no specific law enforcement hires within this bill. The Office of Cannabis Management would be empowered to enter into interagency agreements with other agencies, for example, the Department of Public Safety as needed. The bill also contains fairly extensive civil penalties for the types of sales that you described. Those begin page 26, line 30. Illegal sales can be addressed through enforcement processes through a civil practice that would involve substantial fines ranging from as low as $1,000 for an illegal sale up to $1 million.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Stevenson, I guess I'd like to shift gears a little bit on asking about the power and decision-making we delegate to the Office of Cannabis Management under this. So it obviously delegates some rulemaking authority, but also some discretion on licensing businesses, approving products, labeling. You accepted an amendment and with the idea that you were going to give them some guidance on labeling. And so I understand what the oversight might be in rulemaking, that there might be an administrative hearing process, but what is the oversight or judicial review or about the products that they license, the grants that they issue, whether they're actually meeting the criteria that are laid out in the statute? And this could come from either direction, right? A different governor could appoint a different director of the Office of Cannabis Management who has a very different view about whether this bill is a good idea or not. And so I'm curious about what is the process for us making sure that the Office of Cannabis Management actually does what the bill says it needs to do, both in terms of maybe approving products that the bill says it shouldn't approve, or not offering grants that the bill says it should offer, or not giving a number of licenses that the bill tells it to do.
Thank you, Representative Niska. I will go to the chair, but I also do want to note that we are coming close on time. So after the chair answers your question, if you have any final comments, then we'll continue with discussion. Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to, in the interest of time, direct that correction directly to Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Johnson.
Madam Chair, Representative Stevenson, Representative Niska, I think the short answer to that question is that there are reports required to be given to the legislature. So if the concern is what information needs to be given to the legislature, there are reports. We can talk offline about what's in those reports, and if you feel that that's insufficient, I'm happy to work with you on a future amendment.
Representative Niska, any final comments?
Two final comments. One is that my concern more is about, with that is, who has a remedy or something like that in order to actually force the director of cannabis management to do what the bill says that they should do, not necessarily reports to the legislature. And the final concern, and Madam Chair and Representative Stevenson or Chair Stevenson, you can address this if you want. I am concerned that page 35, line 22, the requirement that the director give points for a diversity plan potentially is buying us federal constitutional liability, equal protection liability if the state is directing private actors to engage in racial classifications or something else that would be potentially violative of the federal constitution. And so agree or disagree with Supreme Court precedent on this. It may be a situation where we're putting the state on the hook for attorney's fees in a Section 1983 action. So that's an additional thing I wanted to raise with this committee as well.
Members, any further discussion on HF100 as amended? I will give the minority lead final comment before asking Chair Stevenson to wrap up.
Thank you, members, and Madam Chair. I hold in my hand House File 100. It is back-to-back copied. The bill itself is 250 pages in length, and the repealers are about another 50 pages in length. This bill consists over 300 printed pages of information. It has 9 articles in it. For those of you who aren't familiar with the legislative process, an article is covering different aspects or different parts of the law or different parts of the subject matter. This committee only has jurisdiction over Article number 1. We offered 6 or 7 amendments today to try to clean up the one article today. As you saw from testimony, you heard from the discussion with the bill author and with others, Article 1 is less than perfect and it needs work. There are 8 other articles in here that will have to go through committees that I tend to believe need a lot of work on here. To the bill author and the chair of the committee, on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota, I ask you to work diligently to not put us in harm's way for getting some things that are very important to Minnesotans if this becomes law, to protect the people based on what we talked about today as you go through the committee stops with the other 8 articles in this bill. Other states haven't gotten it right. I hope Minnesota can get it right. It's your job. The ball's in your court, Mr. Chair, as the bill author. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Driscoll. And Chair Stevenson, you can have final comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm going to be very brief because of the time and just say that I appreciate the discussion today. I appreciate the chance to continue working on this bill. I appreciate the comments made by Leo Driscoll, particularly showing the public just how much work we've already done on this bill and how thoughtful and comprehensive we've already been. But that doesn't mean that the work is done, and we'll continue to work throughout several additional committee stops. So I would renew my motion.
All right. Chair Stevenson renews his motion that House File 100 as amended be recommended to be re-referred to the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Nay. The motion prevails. House File 100 as amended is recommended to be re-referred to the Judiciary, Finance, and Civil Law Committee, and the committee is adjourned.